Many survivors of the fire have refused to go to the temporary shelters provided by government. Some victims were taken to 3 sites last night. Newzroom Afrika's Katlego Sekhotho is at the building in downtown Johannesburg and joins us now. Katlego, what's the situation there this evening?
Evening, Hugo. You know, we are here still at the site where we know that this fire has already claimed the lives of 76 people. But now, in the aftermath of this disaster, you know, there's a growing crisis here as it relates to the people or the victims who've been left behind, and some refusing to go to the shelters which have been provided by government in order for them to at least have a place to stay and some food and water and, you know, have liquids, you know, also because so many of the survivors, some of them are women, children, and men as well, and families as well. So government trying to provide these interventions in terms of a shelter, but transporting them from the site in buses and taking them to the shelters, but some have absolutely put their foot down and said they refuse to go to the shelters. They cite reasons including that, for example, some live in the building next to the one that was burned and they want to actually go back into that building and at least collect their belongings. Others who lived in the building say, look, if you take us to a shelter, it would cost us too much to travel to and from where we work or where we usually are. And so this unfamiliar space, if you will, is not ideal for them, as they say. But I do have with me an activist and a community leader who'd speak to me, who's been trying to coordinate tonight's challenges. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. You've had a number of challenges here in terms of bringing people onto the buses to go to the shelters. What has been the issue, and do you see any solution?
Hi. Yesterday was smooth sailing with getting people to the shelter, except for 40 that was left behind. Was worried about the little worldly belongings that's in the building next to the one that burned down. So I think they've got a valid concern, because some of them has got the traveling documents that's still in the rooms, there's clothing and stuff, and think that's quite valuable to them. So I do understand their plight, that they don't want to currently be at the shelters.
Yeah. So in terms of trying to assist them, I heard you talking to them and saying, at least for tonight, please get onto the buses, go to the shelters, then we can work out something tomorrow. Has that appeal been heard from them?
Okay, we've been trying to get them to get onto the buses, going back to the shelters, but these guys they actually headstrong, the ladies and the gentlemen. They're quite headstrong. They just feel going to the shelter, it's actually a threat to their livelihoods. At the end of the day, it's going to be a threat to their livelihoods, because most of them are working in and around the city, and taking them out of the familiar surroundings, it's gonna cost them, and it's gonna be uncomfortable for all of them.
Mm-hmm. And so now, in the coming days, what do you foresee happening? I heard you speaking about blankets and at least having them have something warm to cover themselves. Those blankets, is that forthcoming?
Okay, I did arrange for blankets earlier on from some of the organizations who actually promised to bring the blankets, but I'm seeing that these guys refused to go to the shelter where they were supposed to have placed in Best Valley. The blankets has been delivered at the Best Valley shelter. Yes. And the food has been delivered there. So we were looking at other alternatives. I was phoning other organizations to see how they can assist with another batch of blankets. And I got quite a few promises where people promised to bring the blankets, but that will only be on Saturday morning. So we are still trying to work around this issue. It's either they're going to have to go without the blankets for tonight, or they're going to have to go and sleep by friends and family until this issue of the blankets and the shelter has been sorted.
Yes. Now, in terms of ma'am, you've interacted with the survivors here. A lot of trauma involved, psychologically, mentally, physically. People are traumatized. What's your experience, or what have you observed in terms of the trauma that's being experienced here?
What I've noticed when I got onto the scene yesterday, I found a lot of bewildered people, stressed out women, and I'm quite thankful for the city officials who was around, but according to me that was not enough, because we needed people need social intervention. People need to go for counseling for the trauma they went through. And it's not just an everyday trauma that these people went through. Some of the family members were caught up in a burning building. Some of them managed to escape by jumping through windows that had burglar proofing on. And apparently some of them told us they couldn't get out of the building because the main gate was closed. So that was actually an issue. Our condolences actually goes to the families who's lost friends and family, and it's quite traumatic for me as a community worker.
Yes. And just a last one, I mean, you're not the only activist here, a number of you coming together trying to work through this. Just your message to other activists who are working alongside you and the challenges you're facing.
Okay, I'm working with quite a few ladies in the city. When issues like this arise, they're just a phone call away, and we come together, we strategize, and we see how we can work around assisting displaced people, distraught people. We try and call out other organizations to come on board and come and assist. And the main issue we actually have here, it's the dragging out of the assistance some of these victims get from government divisions. As we are here tonight, the second night on the scene, and there's some issues that came up whereby we tried calling some of the government officials and all of them's phones are off, which is supposed to be on at 24/7. We need them 24/7, and we've been trying to get hold of different departments whereby their phones were just ringing, and it either goes over to voicemail or whatever. So it's why don't they have certain people who can be on standby when we have dramas like that going on?
Thank you so much for your time, ma'am. Hugo, there you heard it from an activist and a community leader who is trying to coordinate the survivors and at least encourage them to go to the shelters, but meeting a lot of resistance and outlining there that they raise valid concerns as to, for example, their belongings, wanting to at least try and find their belongings, but also the despondency or the distrust that at the shelters they'll be cared for consistently over the coming weeks and days, because many people will not be able to find accommodation for a long time from here. But so those are the issues here. A lot of people still, idling around the block here where the burnt building is, some actually laying down across the pavement. So resisting the help being provided by government here.
Katlego, one of the things that we heard from Dr. Joe Butler speaking from Deep Cliff in Soweto, where he has gone to that mortuary where individuals were trying to identify some of their relatives, was that they would obviously are not looking to arrest individuals that come in without proper documentation, but it would appear that there's very little trust for some of the promises that government makes to these individuals, and obviously their relatives.
Absolutely, Hugo. And that's the sentiment here. A lack of trust that things will be followed through, a lack of trust that they'll be genuinely cared for. And obviously people expressing this distrust by resisting any kind of help that they're being provided. But, this is not an unjustified distrust. I mean, over the years, we've seen xenophobic attacks leaving people in a vulnerable position, and a sensitive issue here where people just don't feel that they're genuinely cared for. And they do say, I asked one of the gentlemen, why don't you want to go to the shelter? He's just like, well, you know what, if you really want to help me, let me find a permanent place to stay and bring the blanket here. I'll figure myself out in some instances, but really push back. And it's not clear. I mean, Minister Lindiwe Zulu was here trying to actually personally encourage people to go to the shelters, but that seems to have fallen on deaf ears to some, although some look like they did get onto the bus. But still a number of people out here on the pavements.